I learned quickly.
You what?
I learned quickly.
Oh, good. Emma came and showed a number of films some months ago, including The Queen's Monastery, which is a particular favourite of mine. Most recently, she's been working on a commission for
Norwich Castle Museum in Norwich.
In Norwich.
Which is sort of Norfolk County Council or whatever, whatever.
As a video installation.
Yeah, so it's a Boudica, basically it's a Boudica, they've got a Boudica gallery, and for people that don't know who Boudica is, they used to call her Boudica when most of us were children, but they discovered that when they transcribed some of the Latin in sort of writings about her, that they'd actually misspelt the name. So about, 10, 15, maybe 20 years ago, they renamed her Boudica. So they set a sort of open call out, which I think they advertised it through Animate, the guy that used to run Animate sent out emails to lots of people. Anyway, basically sent that out to everybody in animation. And I read it and I just thought, oh, that sounded just up my street. Normally it was a small budget, normally I wouldn't think about even sort of putting something in for such a small budget. But because I was particularly interested in the character, I just thought, oh yeah, go for it. So anyway, you have to ask me some more questions, but I've got a bit of a cold, so I'm going to over-talk.
Well, this is one of those things when I actually applied for the same project and didn't get it. So, so Jed, it all comes around.
It's taken a long time.
I was particularly very interested in the approach that you've taken for this, actually using materials. You got to animate with Roman coins, I believe.
Well, I think I'll show the things after probably, because it's nicer to really see the film first. But when I sort of was thinking of ways of making the film, initially I was thinking of more of a style a bit like the Queen's Monastery with watercolour. But obviously, because the budget was so incredibly small, I was thinking, well, I can't possibly do full animation for this. So I'll have to probably do sort of cut-out stuff. And I did some design and I started sort of cutting them out and collaging them, and I didn't really like the look of it very much. And I was just sort of leaving my studio, and I noticed this little bit of broken pottery that I'd drawn a face on. And I thought, hang on a minute, that would really work, this sort of idea of fragments and things being dug out of the ground, sort of archaeological stuff. That's really going to go well with the idea. So that was my starting point. Was this little face that I think it was a bit of pottery that I'd found mudlarking with Jill Bradley, who's another animator. We sort of sometimes go. I don't know if anyone knows what mudlarking is. It's where you go on the banks of the River Thames and sort of look for like rubbish, old rubbish, like really old rubbish, like it's whatever you can find. But we normally sort of find Victorian pottery and sort of rusty old nails and things. Mm-hmm. So that was the starting point.
The connection is that one of the most famous Iron Age finds in the British Museum, which is a bronze shield, which is exquisite, was found under Vauxhall Bridge or something.
Very close by. And actually I did find some Iron Age pottery, but I didn't actually realise until I started working on this that actually I already had some of my own. But they gave me once they really liked the idea of me using kind of found objects and bits of stuff, and I said I'd like to use things from the museum. And I think that was probably the strongest selling point. Although, funnily enough, they did actually quite like the other style as well. So when I presented the sort of pitch to them, I did show a choice of characters. I gave them the other style, plus I gave them the little collaged characters.
But this does seem like a job that could have been created for you, because when we last saw you, you showed a number of your random person animations, and some time ago you said you wanted to make one a week for a year. You've certainly produced a lot of them, and they're very much about materials. They're about things animating. They're sort of, broadly speaking, stop motion. And to imagine a project where you get to play around with things, including museum exhibits, and use watercolour and illustration and so on. It seems, very much you've created a project that, but for the fee, is a dream project for you.
Well, I think also that's the reason why, with something like Random Person, which was done, off my own back and in the gap period between, doing books and earning a bit of money and then not having any paid work, but trying to sort of get back into doing animation after a break. Although when I look at the films, I'm pretty critical of them technically because I've had to do them quickly and with no money at all. It's going through that kind of process of being creative and keeping on going, not just sort of sitting there thinking shit.
Deadlines could be very good in that respect to sort of force you.
I did them quickly because that was the only way I could afford to do them quickly.
Yeah.
I couldn't spend like a year making each one. I'd be dead by the time I'd get through. But I wouldn't never going to get through them if I'd have to live to like 200 or something. So that's why I did try and do them like that. But obviously, as soon as I started doing the Boudica book, I had to stop making Random Person. And she's now waiting for her next role. She needs a new body, and I'm just about to gear up to make her a new body.
You make it sound like the muse is speaking through you, that the Random Person is demanding that you grant her another film, that you breathe life into her.
Yeah, well, I think I have to get back into it, because even though the budget was small, it was a budget, and the budget does allow you to do something slightly better than you would do if you had no money. I mean, I was able to employ like 3 people, Katerina, Julian and Hugh, wherever he is. He hasn't showed up yet. Even though, I only could employ all of them for a very short amount of time, like, a day each, a few days each. So it was but at least then, as you start feeling, God, I've got a team again. Yeah. That's the hellish thing about doing stuff completely on your own.
Tell me about it.
Like Random Person is completely on my own, and I can't even get really asked Julian. Well, he does help occasionally, just shift the light, but it's not like having a professional lighting person who you can, get to. You still have to do it, don't you? You still have to help Hugh, but still, you're not here yet. But it's obviously, that starts feeling like you're back in business, making a proper film again. Yeah. But anyway.
Okay, so do you want to say how many times this has been shown in a public arena?
Hasn't been shown in the public arena. Oh, well, apart from the museum, of course.
Yeah, but this is the London premiere, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose so.
Not for the purposes of applying to a film festival.
Oh yeah, no,
but,
it's only been shown like sort of continuously on a loop every day in the museum since November. But apart from those,
apart from that, being screened about 100,000 times. This is the London premiere.
Yeah, London premiere.
Okay, well that's wonderful and an exclusive.
No, so I was just going to sort of show how tiny the main character was. Most people don't realise quite how small she is. Because when I found, although they didn't seem to mind that she wasn't made of Iron Age pottery, and I sort of thought, well, if they don't mind, I don't mind, because I like the kind of work that she dug out of the ground, so it didn't really matter. But the other characters their bodies were at least, and they're really tiny. The 2 daughters who got raped by the Nero's guys. But I mean, the whole film is supposed to be for it's a sort of family-friendly audience. So I had to think of ways of telling this very gruesome story without overdoing the gruesomeness, and to bring out all the archaeological kind of things that they wanted to show in the museum. So I sort of made, obviously I made their bodies out of bits of broken pottery, and the horses I used, because they have all these fantastic, I've got some pictures actually, but they've got these fantastic, the Iceni are the Boudica's people, make this fantastic sort of gold torques. I don't know if anyone's ever seen them in the British Museum, and So I actually based the kind of design of the characters on the twisted jewellery. So the horse is actually made in a quite sort of similar way to their actual jewellery. The original horse I made out of, I don't know, it's a sort of copper. Is it copper, that wire? Brass wire, but the problem with brass, as any animator knows, is it's very springy.
Soft.
And you don't really, it's not very ideal for animating. So I actually had to cheat, as usual. People always have to cheat with animation. And also, it's just a little bit spindly. I did use that horse just as a background one, but...
So do you mean you used a different wire
I
underneath
actually
and then
used,
put the bronze brass on top?
I did with the actual one I used, because it was much easier to use aluminium wire and then just spray it to make it look like the other wire.
That's not cheating.
Yeah, that's design.
It's design, yeah. It would have been nice to not have to bother. But they're not, though. The look, actually, it was okay. On the very tiny characters,
Yeah.
it was fine to use the very
Yeah.
thin wire. And
You
I
can
mean,
make them
it's
stand
all
up
quite
like that.
crude, really. I just stuck them down with. They're just stuck with blue tack, actually. And Hugh helped me with the green screen, which is obviously, I don't know if anyone's worked with green screen, but getting the green screen right is always quite important. I mean, it's slightly less so now with After Effects, and you can key stuff out. And you showed me, Katerina worked on the film too, so she was helping me on After Effects and showed me different ways of keying stuff out, which I only discovered after I'd done all the other most of the other
keeping the
stuff.
technique secret.
I can't remember now. That's the problem. When you finish a film, it's hard to remember unless you write everything. Well, I do tend to write things down. If I go home and look at my notebook, I'll probably remember. I can remember the one I use most of the time. Everyone knows it anyway.
It was on glass.
Oh yeah. Well, what we did is we built a. So I've got a rostrum camera, and an old 35mm rostrum camera which doesn't have the 35mm rostrum on it anymore. It has a 5D on it. And what we did is we built a kind of shelf to go above the normal table, which had glass on it. And then, yeah, everyone knows with green screen. You just painted a piece of hardboard with some very old, very dry green screen paint that you gave me. It was a bit lumpy. I had to actually strain, so when it's a low budget, I had to actually strain the paint to get the lumps out of the paint. So that was quite, that worked. And a couple of, they were just domestic lights that we did the...
A couple of halogen floods, which with the domestic reflectors, which had the names printed in the reflectors, and the name punched in the reflectors distorted the light. So I had to take out the brand name out of the reflectors, so they didn't.
That's the trouble when you buy stuff cheap.
They're very cheap. They're only 15 quid each.
So that's quite good, and because it's a very small studio, we couldn't have bigger lights to light the green screen. And actually, I don't know if could anyone work out how many lights do you think we used for the top, to light the top of the characters? Anyone guess? Want to guess?
95.
2, 1.
No, yeah, just one, yeah, obviously. So just one very simple light and a reflector. Because I was rather stubborn and had it with my rostrum lights. I was quite happy with just the 2 lights. But Hugh, who's a purist, came in and just said, so that looks very flat and he didn't like it. And we did argue quite a lot about it, but once Hugh lit it, just with the one light, it was so simple, but it just gave that character just a bit of extra form. And that really worked, and it's amazing that sort of subtle difference between what I thought was actually okay and what an expert lighting person thinks is okay. Anyway, thanks Hugh. And just before we stop talking, because I've got a bit of a sore throat, because I think it's quite fun to see a couple of things from the museum, which is. Well, I didn't say that, despite the lowness of the budget, there was a lot of competition to actually get the budget, and it took the best part of 6 months to make fucking thing, really. I mean, it wasn't completely 6 months, but we went on holiday in the middle, but in the middle I was actually doing all the filming in the backgrounds. I did them all on a boat in the Norfolk Broads, all the watercolour skies and stuff. So, but I actually put a lot of work into the sort of the pitch really. And I think 60 people also tried to get the job. So it shows you that this is the pitch. It shows you that you do have to put a lot of work in. Jonathan knows, having done thousands of pictures.
Sure, we all know.
So, you know, it's such an important part of, you know, trying to get the job. So
I almost never win pictures.
well, neither do I. Sure, you know.
And
And those
stuck
were
very
the,
closely,
Yeah,
didn't they?
Yeah.
That's the.
I thought you'd done
You
them
knew
afterwards.
exactly what you wanted,
It's amazing.
right from the
Yeah.
beginning.
and you stuck to it.
I thought I'm not going to like do a film like this and not show them an animatic, because the last thing I wanted to do was to do the whole film and then not be happy. And I thought if I did a storyboard, that was all they wanted before, the next stage was to see the finished film, and I actually pointed out to them that that wasn't wise. So I'm not keen on animatics, but they are useful, and I forced myself to do an animatic. And that was good, because then I could just slot everything in as I went. So that's just the storyboard. And then the way I work is Julian helps with the backgrounds. I always do kind of rough pencil drawings, and Julian then takes my rough pencil drawings and then goes over them. And then we always work very small, like this kind of size, and then we blow them up. And then Julian retraces over the little ones, bigger. And then I did all the watercolours. And then because often I like the bits of the pencil, so I then pop everything back on, bits of pencil stuff back on in Photoshop. But the schedule. And then the other characters were quite interesting, because we had there's a whole massive, oh yeah, those are the cutout characters. So the cutout work was a mixture. Some of it was done real cutout animation, and some of it was done in After Effects. For instance, these guys, the pigs, they're their favourite prize sort of pigs, Stone Age pigs that they have in the gallery. And they're very symbolic, these pigs, because they all have, any ones that they've ever found have got this like mark in the side of them. And it's a ritualistic stabbing of the pig. It's some kind of, they've all got it. So it was some kind of symbol of sacrifice or something. We're not quite sure why. But these are the actual original Iceni coins that they have in the gallery. And so there's some that there, and I actually thought they just sort of wanted to make them obviously into the characters. So I just drew into them, and in fact, started to discover perhaps more about the characters than even some of the coin experts been working on these characters. But by drawing into them, it sort of helped sort of think about what maybe their hairstyles and their headdresses and all those sorts of things. But they were really fun to do. That was just the layout.
It was really fun. It was intense, but really enjoyable.
Yeah, it was a very fun project, and the things like the Roman soldiers and stuff, I think, did I bring those? It's like, yeah, I think there was actually there's just one of them, obviously. But it's just like, that's just the cycle. I think 6 drawings cycle, and then I just popped his head on and then duplicated them. And that's the great thing about you know, After Effects. It's like in the old days, like when I did the Queen's Monastery. Well, we still did a kind of montage things, but there were thousands of soldiers in there, which each one had to be animated into strips, and then we sort of colour photocopied them and sort of did stuff with colour photocopies. Do you remember all that stuff? It's ridiculous. But now it's got to the stage. I mean, I did do about 3 different cycles with some of the different movements, but it is basically just a load of cycles. Obviously, it's not got the same depth or perspective, but there wasn't the money for that. What else we got? Quickly. Oh yeah, just to show how the backgrounds were done. This is just one example. I'm very lucky actually, because I've got Julian, who's fantastic at drawing. And that was I think your original tiny sketch, wasn't it, that we blew up?
It was only that small.
Yeah, from the storyboard. That he just got some really decent. Well, I mean, in fact, he's done some quite architecturally sort of drawings that they haven't actually got in the museum. So some better views of quite a few of the things. But then he did that one, which was the one that I scanned in and used. And my watercolour looks nothing actually, it looks like complete rubbish on its own. But combined, and also I changed the colour of it. That's another thing that's great about computers, you know. I often just do things in completely different colours and just change it all in Photoshop or After Effects or whatever, turned it into a nighttime scene. So anyway, that's how we did most of the backgrounds. So. And the cutout stuff was a mixture. I mean, Katerina did some of the things like with the heads coming down on the stakes. We did that in After Effects because I thought she would do that really well, and she did. So that was great. But then other stuff like the Iceni, I just wanted to, you know, the fighting and everything. That was much better to do by hand because it was felt much more violent doing it by hand and actually throwing blood onto it wasn't real blood, but throwing watercolour onto the glass and onto the thing, and you know that was fun. And actually drawing Boudica's face I didn't draw it every single time, but actually animating that little tiny face and mopping off the mouth and the eyes with the cotton bud. That's crazy, isn't it? I actually quite enjoyed doing that. That was really felt nice, and I was using a massive sable paintbrush as well, and it seemed ridiculous to use such a big brush, but it had a very nice point on it.
Yeah.
And held a lot of the ink. No, because it's this whole thing about Boudica. I mean, did she even really exist? But it's this sort of idea and the sort of relationship with how she's still an important historical figure, and she's been an important historical figure for so many centuries, and it always seems to sort of reflect different things that's going on in society. And now it's, you know, yet again it still seems to be a pertinent kind of story. So I think that, you know, that she was pleased that the emphasis was on the artifacts and the objects rather than just purely the violence. So, you know, and the sort of Boudica being this kind of sexy kind of person with like metal breasts and the long hair. And you know, I said to the archaeologist, "You don't mind I haven't given her long red hair?" And he said, "No, that's fine. You know, the fact that she's just a tiny little character, almost looks like a child. You know, they like that." So. So they're very happy with it.